Hey everybody, it's Craig back with another Mortgage Minute for you, and today we're going to do part one of a four-part series for clients that are going through a divorce and trying to figure out how that impacts their mortgage options. First of all, if you're going through that, I'm sorry to hear that. I know there's nothing fun about that, but there are, I guess you'd say, financial impacts that a divorce has. And so today we're going to unpack the idea of how do you determine net equity. Okay, so if you currently own a house and you are going through a divorce, most likely there's going to be some sort of a determination of how much equity is in the home, because that's an asset, and so that's something that is typically split. I mean, every situation is different, but if it's a situation where one person is keeping the home and the other person is going to vacate the home, but yet they want to be compensated for the equity in the house, then you got to make a calculation of that. So now I'm going to tell you how to do that. We're going to use some really basic math, but I'm going to give you some things to think about that most people going through this situation absolutely just never really occurs to them. So first of all, when most people try to determine net equity, they typically just take the value of the home, subtract out whatever they owe on the mortgage, and they assume, hey, that's my equity. Okay, and that's one way to do it, but you're not really taking into consideration the full cost that you're going to have to realize that equity. So understand something, to get the equity from a house, you have to sell the house. I mean, yes, you can do an equity loan and borrow the equity out, but to truly realize the equity from a home, you have to sell the property to somebody else. So if it's a situation to where you plan on keeping the house, but you feel that maybe 5-10 years down the road you're going to ultimately sell the property, you're going to incur costs to sell that home, right? So one rule of thumb that we use to determine how much it's going to cost to sell a house is just take 7% of whatever the sales price is going to be, and that pretty much covers the cost to sell the home. And how we figure that is most times to list the house with a real estate agent, you're going to pay somewhere around 6% commission. And then there's other costs that a seller pays that's equal to around 1% of the sales price. Okay, now that's not exact. I'm just saying that's a good ballpark. So if we take the cost to sell the home into consideration, then really when we're determining net equity, we've got to take 7% off of that property value number. Another thing to consider is, are there any repairs that would need to be done to bring the house up to whatever standard is necessary to sell the home? So for example, if I've got a house and to sell the house, it would be worth $100,000, but to do that, I've got to make repairs that are around $5,000, then really it's not worth $100,000 today. It's worth $95,000 because it's going to cost me that $5,000 to bring it up to the $100,000 level. So with that said, you kind of get the idea. Let's do some easy math on this, and let's say that you are going through a divorce, you're going to be keeping the home, and you do an appraisal on the house, and the home appraises for $100,000. Okay, let's just use that number because it's easy math for me. Okay, so $100,000 is the appraised value. Now, how do you determine net equity? Well, if you truly want to know the true net equity that you have in the property, take that $100,000, subtract 7%, which in this case is $7,000. That gets us to $93,000. Okay, now let's assume that you've got $5,000 worth of repairs that need to be done to the property. So if we subtract that off of the $93,000, that gets us to an $88,000 number. Okay, and let's say that you currently owe $50,000 on the property. What does that tell you? Well, that means that the net equity is really about $38,000. Okay, give or take. So most people, when they're going through this process, they're just going to say, okay, well, the property value is $100,000, we owe $50,000, so the net equity is $50,000. But again, you're not taking into consideration the cost that's going to be incurred at some point to realize that net equity. If you have any questions about that, give me a call, 615-498-LOAN. That's 615-498-5626. Thanks for watching.